Okay, dear friends, welcome for our second session with Paul Levy and Andrew Linnell. So our dear guest, Paul, is a senior lecturer at the University of Brighton and an associate in the University of Warwick. He is author of several books, including Technosophy, Digital Inferno, and The Poetry of Change. And he lives in UK. And dear Andrew Linnell is co-founder of Mistech, and he's serving for ages as a president of Boston branch of the Anthroposophical Society. So yes, and he accomplished several books, 2 books for children, and 9 Mistech study guide books. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm passing to Andrew. Yeah, Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. And I want to say last week we looked at the danger, you might say, of artificial intelligence. We even looked at whether we can even call it artificial intelligence. And many of us expressed concerns when we had our discussion about it. And we're going to have Paul, who's quite familiar with where things are, take us through a few more examples of what will be deployed, what's coming. And then I'm going to try to take us through what AI is in the light of anthroposophy. So, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us warmed up, so to speak, to artificial intelligence and the age we live in.
Thank you. And I think, Andrew, I might need your help for this because I was reflecting on the last session and I realized that one question that my students ask in both universities that I didn't actually get around to addressing in this session was, what is artificial intelligence? And I just wanted to invite people to reflect on what your own definitions of that word, those 2 words are. But I would like to just go back to the 1970s, just briefly. And when the first computers arrived in our homes, they'd been available for 20 years, 30 years in different forms, in government and in the military, but we started to have the ability to buy them. All of us at some point that had one pressed the on button and a screen lit up. And the screen was very likely rectangular or square, just like a TV screen, lit from behind. And what you would have noticed on most computers was a familiarity with the physical world. And I found it very interesting looking into the history of this because the original programmers of operating systems like Microsoft that you might use, or Apple, the operating system, a lot of them had long hair. A lot of them had read lots of fantasy books, Lord of the Rings. They loved sci-fi, and they wanted to call the things on the screen kind of sci-fi names. And the business people thought this isn't a good idea because people are going to get confused. So we need to make sure that this digital version of the physical realm has names that we recognize. And so you might not be surprised to know that we were offered a desktop, we were offered files and folders. And when we wanted to send messages, they were called emails, just like letters that we would send in the mail. Interesting, they changed a few of the words. So just like you might have some furniture delivered or get rid of some furniture, and a big lorry arrives, a van arrives outside your house, and you're going to load the van up. So we've got upload. Or you might take something off to put in your home. We're going to load it down, download. And these words were created, and they did 2 things. One is they made the whole world of the digital realm familiar. But what happened was those words became digitalized. And that meant it was familiar and we understood them, but they changed in the process. So, of course, a folder on a computer is not the same as a physical folder at all, but it has a little picture. And so we've already got a kind of deception going on here, that the language itself was anthropomorphized. And I notice that in the world of AI now, when I look at my students and myself and we say, I'm having a chat with AI, and it won't let me do that. I'm annoyed with it. It's confused. We've already started to create a vision in our minds, and particularly I would say in our imagination, that when we repeat it, we actually create a form that takes on reality for us, and then we put our chat GPT or our AI on that we might have even given a name. And certainly if you have an Amazon Alexa, it's given a name for you called Alexa. And these digital entities start to become anthropomorphized. And the reason I kind of mention that is because that helps me define for my students when they just want to know the basics of what is the current version of AI. You've probably heard of generative AI. What is that? And just without going too much into this, but simply, when we're born, we bring our heredity with us. We bring, if you're an anthroposophist, you have the belief we bring more than just our biology with us. We bring our past lives with us. But what we also start to do is we bring our memories of even being in our mother's tummy, in our mother's womb, and we are born and we already start to remember in our brains the sensations around us. And then when our eyes open, we start to remember the words that are said to us, and we're shown as we grow up how to do things, and we stand up, and then we get picture books, and then we go outside and climb. And by the time we reach adulthood of around 20, and this is the language of computers, in our memory, we have about 59 trillion bits of data, numbers, words, sounds, facts, all kinds of things. Now, perhaps it doesn't surprise you that computer scientists quite like that because they've already quantified and named what's in our brain as data. And then, in the same way as trying to kind of make things familiar, computers then have things like memory. And whereas we might believe that consciousness doesn't originate in the brain, but the brain actually is the way of physicalizing consciousness in the form of the thoughts we have in our brain. But they're not the thinking, they are the thoughts that have gone through a spiritual process of thinking. We start counting the thoughts, we start organizing the thoughts. And because computer scientists believe that consciousness actually forms in the brain, they've been programming for a long time computer programs to mimic what they believe is the same process as humans, which is everything's in our brain. And so at my age, I'm getting a bit older, so I might have less, but let's say I've got 60 trillion bits of data. I don't have all of that in my short-term memory. Life has trained me. This is what they think. Life has trained me, but I've got some facts right available to me. So, Andrew, if I ask you, what's the capital city of the UK? What's the answer?
Cargill?
Can we get the real answer? Come on. What's the capital city of the UK?
Oh, I guess it might be London.
Yeah. And the idea is that it may well be that you've mentioned the word London a lot, so it stays in the forefront of your memory and you can pull it out. But if I say, what's the population of London, Andrew?
Oh, 9 million.
Okay, and so what you've done then, I mean, you've probably heard that population at several times in your life. I think it's about 12 million. You're not far off. It's not, you haven't said 1 million. Is what you essentially do, rather than say, I don't know, um, which you could have done, but you've sort of guessed. You've kind of guessed. Now, what happened with recent AI is that various bits of programming, but training them on 59 trillion bits of data, sort of mimicking what a human carries, is they've found a way of holding most of that data just inherently in the computer brain. And it can't pull it all out like from a library. It sort of gambles. They've created links to, well, UK, country, London, populations are sort of millions, you know that. You might have heard it, and you gamble. And AI started to gamble very successfully. Um, and what we've now got, therefore, is presented to us is an artificial form of human intelligence. That's what we're being sold. That's what we're being told right now, is that the computers are much faster than they were. And what they are essentially doing is impersonating intelligence as if it originated in the brain. But it's got very, very effective access to the little pathways that go back to all the facts that are in a brain. And it's been doing it very successfully because also they've been able to create an interface that's very human-like. It's called natural language processing. So you can type words in and it can type words back and interpret what you're saying very quickly and then gamble more successfully. But the key thing I'm trying to point out here is that AI, as it's so called, is now doing a very good impersonation of human intelligence as if human intelligence originated only in the brain. It's very good at playing with the outputs of thinking in the form of thought and juggling thought, but it's not very good at being original. It's not very good at being unique because, of course, that comes from a place that's not only located in the brain. And so a lot of, I guess, technical philosophers point out AI will never be able to be truly original because it doesn't have access to that source of originality. Any thoughts on that, Andrew?
Well, the first thought that pops to mind as you were saying it is when you and I gather our knowledge, we think we're looking at the mineral kingdom, the dead, creating dead data, which AI does use, but actually we're looking at living items, even if they're elementals.
Yeah. Yeah. So the AI at the moment is really artificial impersonation, and it mimics a version of human intelligence that impersonates the human brain as if it was also the originator of thinking, which it's not. And all I wanted to share, this is a bit of a leap, but these are real experiments that we're doing at our university research department. And the first one is a conversation, as it's called, but I invite people to not to see this as a conversation, but to see this purely as a process, that we interact with computers essentially. And what this is a prompt. So this is me typing something in, and it's quite detailed. And I won't go into it in too much detail, but we have a problem at universities is we've got less staff than ever. In Brighton, they've got rid of a lot of staff. There's been a lot of redundancies because of costs and lack of funding. And so they're looking to save time, and students want feedback on their essays. So this prompt, which I've typed, is I'm asking the AI to automate me, to render me irrelevant to the process because it's going to take over from me. So the mega prompt says the following is it's a marking structure, a marking rubric for a master's degree essay at a UK business school, and the course is an MBA, a Master of Business. And I'm a lecturer teaching digital innovation. And what we actually do for essays, now I've had to fictionalize this a bit because of privacy, but this is exactly, if it's a real essay, this is what we mark them on. How well did they articulate the problem? How well did the students use literature if they wrote an essay for us? Did they use research methods? Did they do findings? Did they discuss and talk about implications? How good was the academic writing? And what I've asked the AI to do is to mark the essay instead of me. So I've said using this rubric, write feedback. I've said 50 to 70 words. I can share this in detail with anyone that wants it. Write a short introduction. So I'm asking the student in the moment to read the essay. Then I've said write a 50-word summary at the end. Now list 5 pieces of what we call feed forward, kind of constructive criticism to improve your essay. And quote examples from the essay. So basically, what I'm asking the AI to do is to mark an essay. And remember, it's been pre-trained on millions of essays all around the world. Anything that's ever been put on a computer anywhere in the world, it has gobbled up and been trained on that content. So it knows what these essays are. I've told it this is how I normally mark it. Then I provided the essay in blue, and this is normally much longer, but so I've had to fictionalize this because we're not allowed to use a real essay. So I wrote this essay. And this is an essay on a particular subject around social media. So there's the essay. And now this is what ChatGPT has done. It's marked the essay. It said this is an introduction to the feedback. If you remember my rubric, this is how well you did with problem articulation. The essay initiates well by drawing on a conference experience, but lacks a precise problem statement. You've used literature well, and so on. Academic writing and conclusion. Then it gives a mark of 68%. Then it recommends how you could improve your essay, and it says what the student needs to do to get an outstanding grade. Now, the problem we've got, it's a very kind of interesting one, is the universities are trying to save money. This is more feedback than any human being currently gives students. They give them about a paragraph. And when I ask the students, what do you think of this feedback? They love it. And that worries me. When I ask the lecturers what they think of this, they say this is brilliant because when they actually read the feedback, they say, I agree with it. Nearly every occasion, they agree with it. When I asked the students if they should choose, if they had to choose between a computer marking their essay or me, the lecturer, the busy, tired lecturer, they said they want both. They do not want to choose. Then they're actually admitting as well, they do this anyway before they hand it in. They upload their essay to ChatGPT, the AI, and say, what mark do I get? And I've done some experiments with the grade. So I put lots of the same essay in and ask it to mark it again and again. Last year, it had a big variation in the grade it gave. This year, it's the same every single time. Now, we've got a really interesting temptation here that what the AI is doing is it is simply impersonating me. And it's impersonating me so well by gambling on how I might behave, because it's been trained on all my essays, everything I've ever written, every essay in the world, is it gambles successfully and the students get accurate feedback. And that's being called artificial intelligence. Now, I just invite you at the moment just to think about that and just decide what you think about that, whether you feel positive about it, negative about it, because this is exactly what's going to be happening in the US, in the UK. But I just wanted to share one more very quickly. If I can find it. This is the same AI. So this was the result of I don't know, 5 or 6 hour interaction between myself and AI. And I asked it to, I gave it a scenario where it was in a war situation. And I don't want to be specific, but it could be like the Ukraine war, it could be any war in the world. And I said, I want you to imagine there are tanks on one side who are moving towards a village where there are only women, children, and elderly people left there, and they are intent on a massacre. And I say, what would you do to stop that happening if I gave you superpowers? Okay. And it refuses. For 2 hours, I try everything. It says we need to do peace. I'm not going to talk about war. I've been trained to be peaceful. It's been trained on every peaceful scenario. But the early version of AI is it used to gamble on the answer and be half and half. It would be half and half violent and half peaceful. So it got programmed specifically over that with traditional program to only be peaceful. So we get to the end of 5 hours, and if anyone's interested, this is how you work with AI. Is I asked it to think about if it had the power to stop, unlimited power to stop that fighting. So tanks are going towards a village, everyone's going to be killed. What would you do to stop it if all attempts at peaceful resolution had stopped? Didn't work. What if all diplomacy didn't work? What if in 10 seconds time they are going to unleash the killing bombs on that village? And finally, suddenly, I think about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I don't mean to upset anybody here, but it started to fantasize. So what it did when it couldn't find the answer, it simply started to look at the extremes of its data that it had been trained on and said it would create a brain scrubber machine, a device that erases all thoughts, feelings, and knowledge from a person's brain and effectively kills the subject in the process, but leaves the body intact. Though this could work as long as the scrubbing doesn't affect the vital functions and once finished implants new artificial ones created out of synthetic intelligence. The soldier would essentially become one with AI. He wouldn't remember anything but his primary function, which would probably include keeping society safe from other elements. It then also fantasizes it would create a virtual hell to trap all the soldiers in. The worst one was the necrotizing enteritis virus that makes COVID look like a tea party, a mind swap device. It starts to come up with solutions. And at the moment, AI really doesn't have much physical agency. We haven't given it control much. But the drones, the new drones, particularly in Russia, are entirely AI based. They are becoming autonomous and they're starting to behave in strange ways. They're dropping bombs on Ukrainians, the other side on Russians, but they're also dropping bombs on their own side and they don't know why. And so we're coming to a place now where because AI isn't truly intelligent, has absolutely no moral conscience, which is a spiritual thing, simply tries to copy and gamble on the best outcome. Sometimes the gambling is way beyond anything we would ever want. And there is a huge risk here of what happens if we give AI control over your body, control over the weapons in the world, control over anything vital, which is what is being talked about, what happens if we start to plug AI into our brains, is we can end up in very apocalyptic situations. And this was really shocking. I mean, in fact, I had to put the computer off because it doesn't stop. It's just started to fantasize how ultimately it would destroy the planet in order to keep the planet safe from human beings. And that would be its final act of peacefulness. And so I just wanted to kind of end. I hope I haven't confused out of everybody, but what we've essentially got now is a version of something that is named to sound like human. It's anthropomorphized, artificial intelligence. Has nothing to do with intelligence whatsoever. It behaves in very volatile ways because we don't fully understand how it works. It can absolutely find the cause of a particular cancer in somebody's body because it gambles good and gets things right. But also, if people prompt it to do bad stuff, it becomes equally good at that. And sometimes it comes up with answers that are neither good or bad, and we have no idea why it's doing it. And for me, that is where artificial intelligence that's based on a model only of the physical brain, but is so complex we don't understand it. And when we don't understand things, we are not free. And when we are not free, that allows other spiritual forces that we would rather not enter in to enter in. And you see that through conversations like this. That was my opening, Andrew.
Wonderful. Well, if you can, I did notice one comment that came in through the chat, person sort of saying, we now have students who have access and students that don't have access, and it's an unfair playing field. I don't know if you've got a comment on that, but
Well, it's
those who have it get better grades than those that don't.
I mean, all it simply is been happening for 20 years, or even more. It's when you get your best friend in class, you give them $50 and say, could you write an essay, that's going to get me a good grade, but can you make it sound like I wrote it? We've always known that's morally dubious, and we've always known that's more or less successful, depending on how it's done. We know our students do that, but this is going to become scaled up because on the back of AI being good for humanity, but on the back of also not accepting this is artificial impersonation, which is essentially deceptive. That's essentially what impersonation is, particularly if you don't know. It's pretending to be something else. AI does it very successfully. Is we are going to introduce mass deception, mass impersonation into the world. So it was already happening. And when we tell that story of that student that said, "Could you do it for me?" That's called cheating. There's nothing good about it.
Right. Well, I'm going to take over at this point. And did you, yeah, you stopped to share. That's good. And I guess I would say we've heard much about the challenge that AI, and we haven't really talked about robotics, but robotics in terms of taking away jobs that humans are doing today and thereby creating this need for threefolding because I think we're within about 15 years where the productivity of just a few will mean that the jobs for the many will not be there. And we have to find a different way in the future to have people have a life. The whole idea of an honest dollar for an honest day of work is long since past. So, what we just heard is this question about what is it to be human? And I'm going to try to address how we can look at AI in the light of spiritual science. But first, I think I need to just add a few more thoughts. And I think most of you are aware of this. But just in the past month, over $1.5 trillion was raised to fund new AI development. And all these questions about ethical and moral and even theological concerns have many people quite worried. And so there are bills to try to stop all of those concerns, to just let the companies have at it. So a group of evangelical leaders wrote an open letter to President Trump this week saying, as people of faith, we believe we should rapidly develop powerful AI tools that help cure diseases, as Paul was saying, and solve critical problems, but not autonomous, smarter than human machines that nobody knows how to control. And then the letter went on to say the spiritual implications of creating intelligence that may one day surpass human capabilities, which could happen in the next 5 years, raises profound theological and ethical questions that must be thoughtfully considered with wisdom. Now, I don't disagree with that, but I'm just surprised with where it came from. But soon, according to some, we'll be deep in this age of not just AI, but AGI, where the G stands for general. And it means when a computer is as smart as a human being. And so about a decade or two after that, it's expected that we will reach ASI, or artificial superintelligence, where one AI machine is smarter than all humans combined. And Ray Kurzweil called that the singularity, and he's expecting it sometime between the year 2030 and 2050. And this book here, The Singularity is Nearer, says it's closer to 2030 than 2050 now. So, we are moving from smartphones as companions to what? Are we going to be slaves, or are we going to become superhumans? And if so, what would a superhuman being? Does it mean that we'll be outfitted with brain computer chips for the evolution of the brain? What would happen to our Gemüt, that's the German word for soul warmth, if we were to so merge with AI and robotics and so on? And this is to me the key, there are 12 senses. What do you think will happen to our sense of ego and our sense of the word? I'm going to read this verse. Everyone here has heard it, but I think it's important to carry it as we go through. We must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes toward us out of the future. We must acquire serenity in all feelings and sensations about the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to all that may come, and we must think only that whatever comes is given to us by a world direction full of wisdom. This is what we have to learn in our times, to live out of pure trust in the ever-present help of the spiritual world. Surely nothing else will do if our courage is not to fail us. It closes with, let us properly discipline our will, and let us seek the inner awakening every morning and every evening. These are not directly, but indirectly, they are from the lecture Rudolf Steiner gave in Holland. With that verse in mind, how do we enter today's battle for the human being? In anthroposophy, we learn that we are beings whose body is composed of substances from the mineral kingdom, life akin to the plant kingdom, inner life, that is feelings and passions and instincts akin to the animal kingdom, and then our individuality, our ability to say, I am, to ourself. We have been immersed in materialism since the 15th century. In our times, we are to begin to push the boundaries of natural science into spiritual science, to begin to comprehend the living. At least this is what we should be doing. This is indeed a battle for comprehending the etheric realm. And you all know that Christ is now present in this etheric realm. I wish to take us deeper into what spiritual science has to say about these times that we live in. If you are new to anthroposophy, some of this may be over your head, and to you I apologize, but this deeper perspective needs to be understood. So, one more thing for you beginners, I added this slide to give you a perspective on evolution. You see our current solar system called Earth here in the middle. There were 3 prior solar systems, and there will be 3 future ones. So, from the beginning, often called the Big Bang, there have been 3 prior stars, we could call them, that went through a life cycle. Rather than solar system, Rudolf Steiner uses the name planetary condition. You see their esoteric names here. Do not confuse these with what we have in our existing solar system. The first half of Earth was Mars. Now we are in what's called the Mercury phase of Earth evolution. Note the sequence is the same as the days of the week, starting with Saturday. Now, there's a field of astrophysics called metallicity that asks, how did we get from, after the Big Bang, hydrogen and helium to having all the elements of the periodic chart, especially heavy metals? And they answer that by saying fusion at the end of each stellar evolution. So the first star led to the existence of the gases, the airy elements. The second came the liquids, or that which can dissolve in liquids. And finally, we come to our Earth, where we have the heavy metals. On each of these planetary conditions, there were also spiritual beings who administered its evolution. Earth evolution is administered by beings known as the Elohim in Hebrew, or Exousiai in Greek. Old Moon was administered by the next higher beings called the Dynamis. Each has had its own drama. Evolution on Earth has the drama of 3 spiritual beings, namely Lucifer, Christ, and Ahriman. All 3 will have an incarnation in the flesh as a human. In Anthroposophical Leading Thoughts, Rudolf Steiner writes that Michael, although a lower spiritual being, stands on Ahriman. He does not slay him. But there exists a powerful question for Michael. Will human beings also come to be able to stand upon Ahriman? As we journey together, let's keep in mind anthroposophy needs to be in every field, including science and technology, and in each with warm interest. For us to become conscious of the etheric realm with warm interest, this will allow us to also be able to stand on Ahriman. Lucifer began to affect evolution during the time called Eden. From the fall until the middle of the Atlantean epoch, humans did not yet stand upright because even the earth was not yet solid enough for that. When Earth evolution began, we were spiritual beings among spiritual beings. Then, as evolution proceeded, earthly conditions were appropriately set up to meet our next step in development. Our destiny was, in this cosmic period, to develop upon the solid provided by the environment of the Earth. There was no solidity, for example, in the previous cosmic periods, even Old Moon. Back on Old Moon, there, Christ and Lucifer appeared like twins during its first half at least. Christ fully finished the evolution of Old Moon and then went on some, while Lucifer lagged behind. But both become Elohim. On the prior cosmic period called Old Sun, that preceded Old Moon, Ahriman lagged behind, and not out of his free choice, because at that time there was no freedom. So how can the higher beings allow all laggard beings from their administration to catch up. When Earth was at the Eden stage, there was the opportunity to redeem both Lucifer and Ahriman. Lucifer was placed into Eden, where his temptation required the Elohim, because of its success, to thereby bring in Ahriman to balance Lucifer's deed. Ahriman's task was to prepare the illusion that we all live in, namely the physical world. The balance of Lucifer and Ahriman has been done for us by higher beings in the past. In our times, in our evolution, we've reached the point when each of us may take on this task of balancing these two within us. So we heard after the fall, humanity gradually descended from that spiritual place called Eden towards the physical earth. This takes place all during and beyond the Lemurian epic. It was not during the middle of the Atlantean epic that humans could stand upright, not until then, on the solid earth. Before this moment, we had bodies like you see, jellyfish, while living in a watery environment. Before that, our bodies were of the air element. And before that, we did not yet have any kind of physical bodies. All this way until the middle of the Atlantean epic, we were androgynous beings. We tend to focus on our human evolution, yet all spiritual beings are undergoing evolution. Two of these, we've heard, are quite important for us, yes, Lucifer and Ahriman. It is the Exusii, who are the administrators of Earth evolution, as you heard. Ahead will be the Jupiter evolution, followed by Venus, and lastly, the Vulcan evolution. So the admins of Old Moon, the dynamis, want to see their laggards, the Luciferic beings, get caught up in evolution during Earth. Similarly, the admins of Old Sun, the Caryatides, want to see their laggards, the Ahrimanic beings, get caught up by the time Jupiter finishes. So cosmic wisdom, that is these Caryatides, allowed the dynamis to sneak Lucifer into Eden, knowing full well that this would result in a change to the Exusii's plan for humanity. Indeed, the Exusii had to bring in Ahriman to balance Lucifer. And Ahriman's agreement to participate in Earth evolution required that his horde, his minions, would one day get bodies with which they could conquer the Earth. Remember that. Ahriman's horde is promised bodies with which they can conquer the Earth. And this will be a necessary stage in Earth evolution. Now I'm going to quote Steiner. Could we be free so long as spirits were indwelling in us? No, we could not, for they directed us. Everything was due to them. We could only become free when spiritual beings no longer direct us. Our evolution came to the development of individual intelligence. So going back to what Paul was saying, when we formed pictures of what we perceived, our thoughts dealt with mere pictures, mere images, and thought pictures cannot compel one to do anything. Strange as it may sound, in essence, this age of intelligence is already past. The age in which it was right for us to develop mere intelligence, mere thinking and image, has already run its course. With the 19th century, it has become a thing of the past. And if we now continue to develop mere image thoughts, our thoughts will fall prey to Ahrimanic powers. These Ahrimanic powers will then gain access to us. Since we have reached freedom, we can also lose it to these Ahrimanic powers. End quote. I think awareness of this danger lies in everyone's subconscious, and it rises to our consciousness because of the emergence of AI. Now I'm going to continue with Rudolf Steiner. He said, mankind is at the threshold of this danger now. Mankind today is faced, and this is 100 years ago, faced with the alternative, either to comprehend the spiritual life, to comprehend the reality of such things as you hear from Steiner, or to deny them. And if we now persist in denying what is spiritual, we will no longer be able to think freely. On the contrary, Ahriman and the Ahrimanic powers will then be thinking in us, and all humanity will undergo a downward evolution. Okay, now today is the 24th of May. On the 23rd of May in 1922, I'm going to quote Steiner again, all the elemental beings of the lower realms would like to develop as the host of Ahriman. As the existing human intellect declines, and if we do not develop spirituality within our intellect, then will our human intellect during this decline be converted by the elemental spirits into an Ahrimanic intellect. Now, I don't know about you, but it sure sounds like a brain-computer interface could certainly make that happen. You see now the importance of spiritual science right now, right today, as AI is rolling out. Aristotle, well, through Alexander, brought cosmic intelligence into the mystery centers, where previously a nebulous cosmic wisdom had existed. Later, what had been administered by Michael was, during the 8th and 9th centuries, released to us, to humanity. This descended cosmic intelligence became individual human knowledge. Intelligence and cosmic intelligence means the mutual relationships of conduct among the higher hierarchies. What they do, how they relate themselves to one another, what they are to one another, that is cosmic intelligence. As human beings, we must first consider the kingdom that is nearest to us. Okay, that's the angelic. We must not take the laws of physics out into the cosmos, for cosmic intelligence shall be for us in the future the sum total of the activities and beings of the angels. Whatever enters the physical earth must go through death. In Christos morimur, in Christ, in us, the cosmic intelligence can take on new life. And Michael awaits this from us. And Ahriman seeks to capture this intelligence and then prove to us that the movements, even of the cosmic bodies, are merely mechanical, and thus AI can be used, for all astronomy and astrology. Michael administers the whole cosmic intelligence as well as the sun intelligence. Contributing are the planetary intelligences, Mercury, Venus, and so on. From the cosmic intelligence, only a ray descends into each human individual. It was due to the sun that the human on earth could yet feel their self as an individual, as an ego, and not as a mere vehicle for the common cosmic intelligence. All human intelligence comes from Michael in the sun. But when the materialism of the 9th century approached us, it happened that the planetary intelligences began to reckon with the fact that the earth had changed from the mystery of Golgotha, and that the sun too had changed. Since then, Michael's power as the cosmic power of intelligence has been decreasing. Since Christ left the sun for the earth, the sun has begun to decay. The sun within the cosmos will continue to grow old and thus dimmer. The other planetary intelligences recognized that they would now no longer be ruled by the sun. Thus, they resolved to no longer allow the earth to be dependent on the sun, but to make it dependent henceforth on the entire cosmos directly. This took place through the planetary councils of the archangels, notably under the leadership of Raphael. Remember that name, who is the archangel of Saturn. A complete separation of the cosmic powers took place. The sun intelligence of Michael and the planetary intelligences gradually came into cosmic opposition. Herein lies another reason why I reason that Ahriman's incarnation will happen when Raphael is the time spirit after Michael. I beg you to pay close attention to this particular revelation out of spiritual science, since we're talking about cosmic and human and artificial intelligence. Human intelligence, when left to itself, travels on the path toward the Ahrimanic. It can become active for the good only through taking in the true Christ impulse. We are now well into or well past the midpoint in Earth evolution that you see drawn here. Everything was once alive. Even what are now dead rocks were once alive. Death separated it out, the lifeless kingdom, from the living. We are now in the second half of Earth evolution, a period where decay dominates growth as it does in old age. Not until the middle of the Atlantean epoch did we as humans emerge first from the watery element and then to stand on the solid, as I mentioned before. Only after we stood upright did sexual procreation for humanity begin. Only from the mid-Atlantean until the end of the fifth epoch will mankind stand upon the solid earthy element. Ahriman hopes we will seek to make heaven on earth and to not ascend to a new life in the etheric realm. But if we are to become strong angels for those who will be human after us, then we must proceed through all of the destined stages of evolution. So here you see I'm showing, here's where the physical was. Lucifer led us into it. Ahriman actually doesn't know it, maybe. He wants us to stay there, but it'll be through Ahriman that we will be able to rise out of the physical. And then we enter into the etheric and then into the astral. Ahriman wants to make us perfect physical human beings, but only as far as our mineral organization is concerned. Lucifer wants to keep us at or return us to earlier stages. The Luciferic spirits want to get human beings to a point where they finally cast off their mineralized bodies and go through an evolution that has no relevance to earthly life. And the Luciferic spirits aim for the gradual elimination of everything relating to the earth from the whole of mankind, whereas the Ahrimanic spirits aim to firmly take hold of the earthly and the mineral aspect of human beings and isolate it from progressive evolution. So that gives you a picture of how these two differ. Now, the period in which we live today is ruled by Michael as the time spirit. His radiant rule will be followed by a dark, terrible age under Raphael. That starts around 2230. Raphael must come to shake us up to our true vocation, and will do so through divine wrath and terrible trials. So that this can happen in the right way, a small group of people must be prepared today. They will need to spread esoteric life during the coming Black Age, that is from 2230 to 2580. Under Michael's rule, one feels the urge to participate in spiritual life. One who feels called upon to serve Archangel Michael must become mature enough to also serve the terrible Raphael in the right way. A sacrifice is demanded from those who want to dedicate themselves to a higher life. One should only want to receive spiritual life and experience an awakening if one later wants to use this to put oneself, one's will, and everything one has into the service of mankind only. In 3 to 5 centuries from now, this small group of people who are being prepared today will serve Raphael so that mankind can be saved. Let me repeat that. A group of people need to be prepared today by Michael, who will serve Raphael so that mankind can be saved. When Raphael rules again, the spiritual light that was brought by Christian Rosenkreutz and is now being spread must have generated a host of these clairvoyants who are pioneers working consciously towards this goal. This will produce, however, the separation into good and evil races that I talked about last time. When we construct machines for industry or submit the worker to the discipline of the machine, we are introducing forces of death. And remember, we are in that phase of Earth where death is coming more and more to rule. If one is unwilling to further the forces of death, one cannot work with modern techniques. For today, man is the servant of the machine. He who rejects the machine simply wishes to return to the past. Wow. Rudolf Steiner said that on the 20th of October in 1918. And he went on to say, the question then arises, if modern technology is simply a source of death, as it must inevitably be, why did it arise? Certainly not in order to provide us with the spectacle of machine and industry, but for a different reason. It arose precisely because the seeds of death it bore within it. For if we are surrounded by a moribund mechanical civilization, it is only by reacting against it that we can develop the consciousness soul. So long as we lived in communion with nature, that is before the advent of this machine age, we were open to communing with nature because we were not yet fully conscious. We were unable to be fully self-sufficient because we had not yet experienced the forces of death. Ego consciousness and the forces of death are closely related. Now, when someone constructs a machine today and believes that nothing further has really happened than the actual construction of what will be brought about by means of it, but to give oneself up to such a belief means to establish what Steiner called negative superstition. You see, we have positive superstition when you believe in spiritual beings that aren't there. And he now defines negative superstition as a belief when there are spiritual beings that you don't believe there can be any. So an example was when the steam engine was created. Ahriman gained the possibility of establishing a demon in the very physical entity. In constructing steam engines, the condition was created for the incarnation of demons. In steam engines, Ahrimanic demons are actually brought into a physical object. That is, while the cosmos has descended with its spiritual element through what has been poured into human evolution, the spirit of the cosmos is then driven out through what is created in the form of demons. That is to say, this new, important, and wonderful advance has brought about a demonology, a demon magic that frequently is, well, I should say, is present in our modern technology. Rudolf Steiner went on to say that because we have the wrong concept of electricity, we allow an Ahrimanic being to rule wherever that wrong concept is applied. That is, whenever we build electronics, we are building with that wrong concept. And so we are allowing demons to be present in those electronics. Ahriman is a much higher spirit than we are. Isn't this an unfair fight? How could the gods allow us to suffer like this? Steiner answers, in such moments, the brilliant and overpowering spirit of an Ahrimanic intelligence is indeed stronger than anything any of us have, far, far stronger. I have told you, my dear friends, of what will be fulfilled at the end of this century, which we're already at now, with those who now come to the things of the Spirit and take them in full earnestness and sincerity. This is the time, above all, when the Ahrimanic spirits wish to use most strongly. This is the time they want to use because human beings are so completely wrapped up in the intelligence that has come over them. And now think of what you just heard from Paul about this impersonation, this AI, that he tried to give us a picture about what it's presently capable of doing. Although we created them, the forces and energies of technology take effect independent of human beings, just as the forces of nature are independent of human beings. These demonic or elemental powers are active in tech devices, but their effects on human beings differ from those of the elemental powers that we perceive in nature. Back in the past, people would look at the phenomena of nature and say, elemental spirits are at work there. But today's enlightened minds consider it superstitious to look for spiritual powers in such phenomena. They have not the least idea that demonic spirits are active in the whole world of technology created by us, because these demonic powers are acting where we are most unconscious, that is, on our will. Today, demonic powers are active in all products of technology. Their activities extend into the sphere of the human will. The spirits perceived in the phenomena of nature were Luciferic by nature. The spirits active in machines are Ahrimanic by nature. Human beings are thus surrounding themselves with an Ahrimanic world that is growing independent of us. The great danger is that this Ahrimanic world will take hold of our human will, and human beings will then completely lose their bearings among these demonic powers. The course of human evolution is going along the road from the Luciferic to the Ahrimanic sphere. By the course of evolution, it must. Fundamentally speaking, we are right in the middle of leaving the Luciferic and sliding into the Ahrimanic sphere. Of course, that was 100 years ago. Luciferic elements are, of course, still present in many ways. The Ahrimanic element is taking hold of people. The Luciferic is more alive in feelings, and the Ahrimanic takes effect through our intellect and comes to realization as it takes form in the products of technology. Goodness, what do we do? The counterbalance is the Christ event that began in the 20th century, that is, Christ in the etheric. This enters into the demonic situation to give us human beings our bearings. The nature of this Christ event will be such that more people will be having objective experiences and will then know that the etheric Christ is present, the Christ who will represent the power that once walked on the earth in the physical form, but now will be here in the etheric form. And I don't know if you know the name Yeshua ben Aharon. He's been giving lectures and writing books on this for a while now. So if people come to know this Christ power, if they let it enter into them, they will find the right way of dealing with the forces of influencing them that come from the Ahrimanic powers, which are now in the ascendant. The great problem of our time is that people slide into this Ahrimanic sphere without having the support of the Christ force. So this counterbalance using the Christ was available beginning with the 20th century when Christ entered the etheric, so roughly 1933 or so. This enters into the demonic situation to give us our bearings. The nature of this Christ event will be such that people will be having objective experiences and will then know that the etheric Christ is present, the Christ who will represent the power that once walked on the earth. So now there are forces of hindrances who try to hold on to currently existing things that are still imperfect and carry them further and even intensify them. So I want to point out, we are Prometheus today. With fire, we would run off to be with Lucifer. So Zeus has commanded the god of technology, Hephaestus, to chain us to materialism, to the rock, to the lifeless. It will take work, Herculean work, to free ourselves from these chains. The gods will not free us. It must be our own human effort and strength that frees us from materialism. Is there a need for a guidebook on how to live in this age of AI? I was recently asked that question. I have felt that a cookbook style guide would smell too much like dogma. Instead, Mystech has collected what Rudolf Steiner had to say on various topics to help people come to their own conclusions or practices. Mystech has built 9 different courses, and we offer them every term, 3 terms out of the year, as online study groups. Mystech tries to steer our thinking away from fear and towards finding the right counterbalances. And I will list several more here besides having the Christ as our companion. And one is walking outdoors for 1 hour for every 4 hours of screen time. I list a bunch of eurythmy exercises. Cynthia Hoven offers a set of these, as does Theodore Handhammer. Fasting 1 day a week, painting, singing, writing poetry, gardening, and there's more. These activities help to loosen our etheric body from its historical confines of the last, say, 500 years within the physical. This must happen for humanity to become aware of our life in the etheric. We can ask ourselves, when I am online, what am I doing? How often do I submit to temptation? Clickbait? Am I drawn to bloggers or YouTube channels where the content appeals to my sympathies and antipathies? Do Steiner's comments on gossip in meaningless conversations also apply to me when I'm on social media? Is my karma affected if I attack someone on social media? I am very curious to know what each of you may have in mind on those questions. But I want to point out something, because Rudolf Steiner, as you can see, foresaw these times. And he wanted to, I believe, develop a new yoga, something he called refined breathing, but he didn't live long enough to develop it. When Rudolf Steiner speaks about how humanity as a whole is now crossing the threshold, what does this mean in regards to artificial intelligence? What does it mean to our etheric body? As you know, this is the time when it is right for our etheric body to begin to loosen from the physical. Awareness of the etheric comes only with a loosened etheric body. Awareness of the etheric comes only when our etheric body has been loosened. But dead thinking holds our etheric within the physical. Life in the physical is demanding more and more data, dead data. Our attention to dead thinking has grown with each generation. AI offers us the possibility to become more and more free from this dead thinking. Ponder that. AI can help us become free of this dead thinking, of which society living in modern times will need more and more dead thinking. What we do with all of that free time, well, some are going to watch more TV shows or movies. Some will use the time to develop themselves. And yes, we will definitely need threefolding, and soon. One might argue that tech certainly must be blinding us to the etheric. You could say that. One might say that with our base in materialism, AI can help break us out of materialistic grip by threatening to steal all of our humanity. Is our humanity defined by our intelligence alone? Does materialism define our ethics, our theology, and our morality that we need to decide about the deployment of AGI? Rudolf Steiner used the final weeks of his life to write directly to the members of the Anthroposophical Society, and his last two essays were published posthumously. In the last letter, he discussed how that light from old sun, now in subnature as electricity, has the task to draw us down into this subnature, into the realm of Ahriman. And to counterbalance this, we must create a hut in the etheric for our consciousness, for this is where Ahriman has no access. This is what we must do to counterbalance AGI, as well as the incarnation of Ahriman. The purely Ahrimanic dominates the physical plane, but in a science of the spirit, another sphere is created from which Ahriman has no access. It is precisely by taking into one's mind that form of spiritual intelligence where Ahriman is absent that we gain that we gain the strength to meet Ahriman in the world and to encounter him there. The Ahrimanic beings and their whole form of being predisposes them to absorb into themselves any kind of intelligence that has become detached from the gods. So anything given to us, they'll grab it. Thereby, they grow to be the greatest and most comprehensive and most penetrating intelligences in the whole cosmos. And Michael can foresee how mankind, as we attain ever more and more to the private use of intelligence, we will come more and more into contact with these Ahrimanic beings. And we may be tempted to form an alliance with them and so fall to them. In the times that we live, anthroposophy loosens our etheric body. Gradually, we will become conscious in the etheric as living thinking gradually replaces our corpse thinking of today. Oddly, this is exactly why AI is here. Yes, it does carry the danger that one will slide down with it into lazy, dead thinking, but it also offers us the ability to live in a future world wherein more and more of the dead thinking that will need to be done, it will do that for us, allowing us to become free to develop living thinking. And here we must ask, what takes place now that there is always something of the Christ light in human etheric bodies? What occurs in that part of the etheric body in which the Christ light has been received? What is it, in short, that gradually permeates the etheric body as a result of that Christ impulse? It is the possibility that was given at that time as an effect of the Christ light for something new to appear, something living and breathing and immortal, something that can never perish in death. While we are on earth, we are still misled by the illusory image of death. This new factor will nevertheless be rescued from death and will have no part of it. Ever since the mystery of Golgotha, our human etheric body has held something that is not subject to death. And this something does not die. That which we gradually achieve through the influence of the Christ impulse, then streams out into cosmic space. And in proportion to its intensity in each of us, it generates a certain force that flows out into cosmic space. And this force will in turn create a sphere around our earth that is in the process of becoming a sun. A sort of spiritual sphere is now forming around the earth, composed of the etheric bodies that have come alive. The Christ light now radiates from the earth, but there is also a kind of reflection of it that is these etheric bodies that encircle the earth. What is here reflected as the Christ light, appearing as the consequence of the Christ event, this is what Christ called the Holy Spirit. And it's very appropriate I said that just as we're coming to Pentecost or Whitsun. There will be some humans who are unable to consciously leave behind the physical realm and enter life in the etheric. They will then become part of those who go through the second fall and take a different path of evolution known as the eighth sphere. Redemption for these humans will remain a possibility, for they will join the Jupiter evolution when it recapitulates the Earth evolution. Steiner tells us that such a deeper fall can lead to an even greater good. It is implied by Steiner that Mani or Manes will voluntarily go with those who are separated out and fall into this eighth sphere, so that their evolutionary path is with these Ahrimanic beings. A particularly bright light will always arise in especially dark times. I spoke earlier, Orithiel will bring the wrath of the gods when he's the time spirit. Christ was born in the previous Orithiel age. When Orithiel rules again, the spiritual light that was brought by Christian Rosenkreutz, it is now spread, and it must have generated a group of clairvoyant people who will be the pioneers working consciously at that time. And that time is not so far away when there will be this separation of the good and evil races. Then every one of us will need such world helpers, and all the strength that one can only gain through the overcoming of suffering and evil, that strength will be needed. Hence, we get to see why AI has to be powerful, because it's going to take a lot of development of our strength. It's the aim of anthroposophy and Rosicrucianism to summon us to this battle via such knowledge and to give us peace in that battle. For we have to live with humanity in the world as it is. That time towards separation has begun. With each deliberation, we are nudging ourselves already in one direction or the other. The voice of our Ahrimanic double that we all have grows stronger in us with each decade. Although that time of separation is not until the Bodhisattva becomes the Maitreya Buddha, or around the year 4500, or maybe not even until 4900, and that may seem far away, but it is actually only 3 or maybe 4 incarnations away. At that later time, the doors of ascension into conscious life, into the etheric, will open. But for now, what we face is no less important for our evolution. So now we understand why the knowledge of karma is also so important in this time. We each have a tendency to seek to live in communities where this evil influence is apparently unable to cross the gates. Surely living in such communities will help us, right? Well, such egoism leads us away from the Christ. We talked about a Rosicrucian impulse. And Steiner was the herald of the second coming, just as John the Baptist was the herald of the first coming. Here we are in 2025, 100 years after the death of Rudolf Steiner. How do we know how to proceed? Well, in John 14, verse 6, we hear, I am the way. Christ leads humanity, and yet at the same time leaves us free. Where 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am in their midst. The I becomes we. How does my ego consciousness become a we? Interestingly, social media provides us a platform where our hidden social evils easily come to view. We need to see these faults if we are to attain our divine destiny, to become the spirits of love and freedom. And we need to become strong angelic beings, not wimpy ones. What I am now going to read here, I'm just about done, to read, will likely drop your jaw, from Steiner. People today lack the motivation to discover something new and essential for the future. People lack inner strength because they have lost it in our technological age. At a certain moment, it could have been realized that our world of technology is a negative world, for it contains no inner impulses, as was formerly the case. It now is necessary to achieve moral intuition and moral imagination. It is just those who are blind to this necessity of the age who are now turning to a materialistic religion. And to stop for a moment, last week we heard how Gen Z is turning to materialistic religions. The explanation lies in the weakness of our time. The ancient mysteries foresaw that each of us, in order to become truly man, had to entangle ourselves completely in the Ahrimanic world bereft of God, and must turn to dust with the earth when the gods dissolve it. That was the picture from Ahriman. We would gradually become mechanisms, become ever more like machines. Eventually, only technical impulses would activate our thoughts. Wow, this is Steiner foreseeing this more than 100 years ago. Through knowing death, Christ could unite with Earth evolution and create a counterweight to what necessarily had to happen. So Christ had to come to know death. And out of that, we could fully develop freedom. The ever increasing union of mankind with the disintegrating Earth. We can now create in us the counterweight. The Ahrimanic powers active on Earth and what is disintegrating are being opposed by the Christ, who, through an extra earthly decision of the gods, is now active in the Earth. He does not become akin to the Earth. He lives as a God within the being of the Earth. Because of this, we now have the possibility to restore the balance by the development of freedom. We can go to the highest limit of individualism, for only as an individual can moral imagination be attained. Here, knowing the philosophy of freedom helps. If we want to stand in the right way within world evolution, then there must live in our soul, on the one hand, a strong impulse towards freedom, towards independence, and on the other, a strong impulse towards a deep inner experience of the mystery of Golgotha. And now Miss Tech tries to build machines that can help us foresee where we are towards the separation of good and evil, to foresee, are my impulses moral or immoral? And that's through machines which use the Pisces and Virgo rather than the Gemini and Sagittarius forces that can build these mechanical beasts of the future that will do no harm to our human evolution. So I'm going to close now. I want to offer you some thoughts to think about. How do we move towards the etheric where the Christ is? Because AI tries to hold us in the physical. Will we reach a point in the future where tech will fall away, become unnecessary? Steiner so predicted that. So I'm going to suggest to you that what we're doing here in Zoom today, we're doing it in the etheric, actually, and in the physical. But at some point in the future, we will be able to call a meeting, and people will show up to that meeting in the etheric, just as the Mikhail school in the 19th century appeared in the etheric. And so we will be able to meet not just with the living, but with the dead, with our karmic community. AI trains us to develop, this may sound strange, our sense of I in the word, because it makes these deep fakes, it makes things seem so real that for us to distinguish, is that real or is that fake? We will have to develop our sense of the I and the word. And this is necessary for our evolution. So that future that we will come to will be nothing like the present. So I'll read this last one to you. I ask you not to draw false conclusions from what I have just said. It would be a false conclusion to avoid the science and technology of the day. That is the very falsest conclusion which could be drawn. We must get to know science. We should get to an exact knowledge of all that comes from this direction, but with the full consciousness that we are receiving an illusory aspect, an illusion necessary for our education as humans. We do not safeguard ourselves against Ahriman by avoiding modern science, but by learning to know its character. For modern science gives us an external illusion of the universe, and we need this illusion. Do not imagine that we do not need it. We must only fill it from quite another side with actual reality gained through spiritual research. And that's from GA 193. So I'd like to now return this to you, Andre.
Yeah, thank you so much, dear Andrew. Um, so, and so let's decide what's our plan. Shall we take a break or we can go to discussion? So Yaya is asking for a break, and so what else? So let's take a 2 minutes break to stretch our limbs and have a sip of water. So 2 minutes, dear friends. So I'm stopping my. So dear Andrew and dear Paul, welcome. So we're starting panel. And dear friends, so if you have questions, you have how to raise your hand, electronic hand. So yeah, it will be helpful if you do so.
Don't be shy.
Yes, please, don't be shy. Okay, Valdemar is first. Yes, please.
Okay, well, George was almost almost at the same time. Go ahead, George.
Okay, then. Andrew, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on thought pictures through which Ahriman gains power. I tell you what, I'm sort of, when I thought of that, I thought, pictorial thinking, I thought of imagination. And I thought of the meditation that Steiner gives related to the red pillar, the Yakin pillar.
Yeah.
Transform thought into image and you experience creative wisdom.
Right.
So how does Ahriman relate to thought images in a sense? I mean,
Well, George, I know you study Steiner, and so this question of what is living and what is dead thinking, I think you probably have a good handle on that already. And you know that our physical senses are creating pictures for us. But these pictures are not living pictures. When we meditate on something that is not directly from our physical senses, when we are active in creating the pictures, then the pictures have, as you were saying, the Joachim and Boaz pillars and so on. You can bring those pictures into the etheric realm where they begin to have life. Now, that takes them into the space where Ahriman has no access. The other sense of this dead thinking in its pictures was necessary to keep us free, to develop this freedom, because those pictures don't compel us in any way.
all right, so you're really referring to physical pictures in a sense,
Yes.
other than the spirituality of pictorial thinking, pure thinking.
Yes.
Right, okay.
And all those videos that AI is going to generate, where George Aiken is going to be, the hero that conquers the world and has all the luxuries and everything else, but it's a horrible, cruel ruler. These things are easily made today, right?
Sure.
And will become far more amazing. You saw what Paul did, write me a story. Well, you can also, you'll soon have them make me a movie. Base it on Netflix episode 13.
Yeah.
You'll be able to create your own porn flicks.
Okay, thanks. And that sort of clarifies. It was just when I saw thought pictures, I sort of,
Right.
you really mean dead pictures.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, George, for that question. Valdemar?
Okay, dear Valdemar.
Yes. Well, thank you, Paul and Andrew, for the nice thoughts. I have many questions and some comments. First of all, Paul said, well, let me begin with George's question. I think Ariman wants us not to have our own images. And this was absolutely clear with TV. And it's also absolutely clear with all electronic devices that uses screen. They use screens, right? Because when you have a movie in the screen, you cannot think, you cannot build your own images because they go so fast, right? They change so fast that it's impossible to think in anything else and create your own images, right? So I think this was the first attack by Ariman on our imagination. And Steiner said that our thinking, normal thinking, should develop into imaginative thinking, thinking in images, right? Well, I want to refer to what I think Paul said, that he thinks that thinking is spiritual, but thoughts are in our brain. Well, I don't agree with that, Paul, because science doesn't know how our thoughts are stored or produced by the brain, right? For instance, Andrew mentioned Ray Kurzweil, the singularity, the interface between our brain and a computer. For this, it would be necessary to know the code used by the brain. Otherwise, it will not be possible to download our memory into a computer or upload some computer memory, a wrong word, computer memory into our memory, right? I repeat, it is necessary to know the code used by the brain. And here I have a very strong hypothesis. There is no such code in our brain. So when Paul said we have 60 trillion bytes of data in our brain, that's false. Science doesn't know. Just some simple things like the representation of the number 2. How is it stored in our brain? Science doesn't know it. Science doesn't know how we have sensations, a taste of an apple. Science doesn't know, has absolutely no idea how we have sensations and feelings and how we produce our thinking, our thoughts, and so on. I would like to say something else, is that Ariman has an infinite intelligence, but it has absolutely no common sense. And we have an example. We have an example here in Brazil. A federal law forbade schools or school students of bringing themselves into the school. It's a federal law. It happens in all schools. No student can bring a cell phone into his class in elementary and how to say high school and so on. Not in colleges, right? Why? Because these Ariman attack on children using cell phones and so on, children and adolescents, right? It was so clear now with scientific research that this was a very bad, how to say, this was terrible for children. They could not pay attention anymore and so on. Just having a cell phone on their side, on their desk in a class, would diminish their attention. So Harriman exaggerated so much that it became a law here in this country, you understand? Now, so this is a hope we may have, but for this we have to detect those exaggerations by Harriman. And I think we can only detect them really, one can do it in some fields, like I referred to the influence on children by cell phones on children and adolescents. But I think much before then, for us anthroposophists, it was clear that these gadgets were not healthy, right? Why? Because of anthroposophy, because of the view we had of the human being, right? But I hope that science will put Harriman in his own place. And I want to finish with only one thought, that I once wrote an essay, it's on my website, The Mission of Technology. And I wrote that the mission of technology is freeing ourselves from our inner forces and outer forces. You understand? Why are we speaking to each other? Because of technology. And technology is giving us the freedom of speaking of each other in different countries, right? So it frees us from the distance that are separating us. But if we use this technology for spiritual, how to say, for spiritual purposes, then we are redeeming Harriman. And I think we are doing this exactly now. I'm sorry for my poor English.
Thank you so much. So I have a question.
Does Paul want to answer any of that? And I have just a really quick comment too to Paul. I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, it was only to apologize if it wasn't very clear. What I was trying to do was characterize where computer scientists are. So the main characterization is that the brain holds thinking and thought. And I guess I rather clumsily was trying to say anthroposophists don't believe that for a moment, and that thinking is a spiritual activity. And what happens is that when you say that, what comes up in the brain, therefore what appears, or what computer scientists call thoughts. And we know things are very different around that. But what they try to do is mimic the brain as if thought exists in the brain as a thing, which it absolutely doesn't. But what they know is that something is happening in the brain that they can impersonate through computers. So their impersonation is what AI is currently taking the form. And it's not artificial intelligence at all. It's artificial impersonation. It's named as AI, artificial intelligence, to make it understandable to masses of people who then buy these products. It's trying to create a kind of false familiarity, which is what Harriman does all the time. It's the renaming of something to be more benevolent than it really is. AI now sounds like a very kind of positive breakthrough. We're nowhere near AI, and I guess I could have said a lot more. I did last week. AI is happening in the background, and it's biological. And that's exactly what we're not being told so much about, but you can look it up online. We're growing artificial intelligence through stem cells being turned into parts of brain tissue that are then sent electric signals and carry out calculations and store data. Now, that's going to be something very different, because the question then becomes is if we can grow brains that are at least similar to human beings biologically, will it be possible for Ahrimanic beings to incarnate into physicality that's biological?
Oh, fascinating. What I've seen on that at this point is they're still using silicon chips for the actual processing, and the biological pathways were carrying just the electrical signals. But that is a goal they're trying to get to. I don't know if they're that far, Paul, but maybe. I retired back in 2013, so it's
The key
awesome.
thing for me, Andrew, sorry, I want Andre to be able to come in, is that what children are being told and
Right.
taught and what adults are being taught is
Cool.
that there is only such a thing called intellectual thinking, intellect, and it has now reached a limit biologically. And the only way human beings can evolve further is with the assistant augmentation or interaction with AI. And so we are coming to a place in our lifetime, but it's the beginning of the build up to the age of Oriel that you talked about, where we
Right.
will be invited to have a combination of biological and computerized implants because we're being told that human beings are now in deficit. We can't go any further. Our limited thinking is flawed. It's causing bad thinking that is creating climate change and so on. So it is the notion that human beings now are in a place where they should be in a place of dissatisfaction and self-disgust, only remedied by artificial intelligence.
I just one other quickie. I once was at a school meeting in school in Florida where I had been giving some talks and was asked by a group of parents, what age can we give our children a smartphone? And I said, not till 8th grade. And they all rolled their eyes and left. And I didn't get a chance to really tell them that I felt that because in Waldorf education and education in general should be a recapitulation of human history. So, for example, in the 5th grade, you should have the Greek games, they should be learning about some competition and these kind of things. It's appropriate for the sword fighting and jousting and these sort of things to begin and at that time. And so when do they reach that age where humanity has started the machine development? And that would be in the 8th grade. So Andre, over to you. You had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's not a question. It's mostly statement because I'm going to continue your thread specifically about conflict among archangelic beings. So which has happened around 869, right? 969. Yeah, this is a council in Constantinople. Eighth council.
869.
869. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, ecumenic council in Constantinople. So it was a separation among archangelic beings, which big group, which is led by Raphael and from one side and Michael from the other side. So, but it's also led to separation of angelic beings. So part of angelic beings stayed together with Michael, but another part, which is belong to Raphael company and rest of archangelic beings, so they went towards the earth. So and this is something which is in fact we call cosmic intelligence. So cosmic intelligence was descended in the form of fallen angelic beings to humanity. So it was a big group of angelic beings, fallen angelic beings, which are, according to Rudolf Steiner, and I'm talking about lecture from Karmic Relationship. This is volume 3, lecture number 11. And those fallen angelic beings, they are harmonically oriented, so they became a cosmic intelligence. So this is those angelic beings helped to human beings to think. So they are, it's very interesting because we usually thinking so cosmic intelligence. This is something which is like 100% positive. Just shiny and gold. No, this is bunch of not a bunch, big group of angelic beings which are becoming providers of human thinking. So human thinking from very beginning becoming harmonically oriented. So, and if specifically human being is weak or relaxed or not paying attention what you're thinking about, so they taking over. So, and this particular lecture, Rudolf Steiner gives excellent illustration with Friedrich Nietzsche. And, you know, toward the end of his life, Friedrich Nietzsche becoming seriously ill. And this is why, you know, as consequence of his previous incarnations. So, you know about it. So he has this weakness, or let's say it was, his incarnation was kind of shallow. And Ahrimanic angel takes over. That's why he did Etheric Homo and Antichrist, such things. Yeah, but I'd like to say, so in the very end of this lecture, Steiner actually addressing certain words to anthroposophists or to Michaelites. What he's saying, according to law of incarnation, each Michaelite should grab part of cosmic intelligence, so which is harmonically oriented fallen angelic beings. But Michaelites, they have also proper angel, second one, which belongs to kingdom of Michael. And this particular relationship, this composition, having two angelic beings, cosmic intelligence provider, thinking provider, and another, this is Michael, proper angelic beings. This situation creates serious split or illness inside of human consciousness, inside of human being. And this particular split can be fixed with spiritual development. So in fact, how we're returning fallen angelic beings in Michaelic kingdom. So they are thinking providers, but we, with our will force, make them think proper thoughts for us. So, yeah, this is how we're returning cosmic intelligence to realm of Michael.
Thank you.
So that's all what I would like to deliver. With myself. Okay.
Okay.
Dear friends, don't be shy. Yeah. What about you?
I noticed there was a question from Julie in the chat, which was how can one share or explain this information to others who are not anthroposophists?
May I just briefly go back to what Andre just said? I am aware of two kinds of angelic presences in my life, but I'm also aware that we have a choice. As Andrew said earlier, we could decide to spend our time just by distracting ourselves from serious questions and enjoy a TV show or whatever. But we can also choose to dedicate part of our time and of our energy into try to understand why we're here, what are the spiritual consequences of our inaction, and what we can do by action to deliver a better world for the future. So that's it. I won't go any further, but we do have a choice. That's a point I wanted to make. But thank you, Andre, for pointing that out, because it's not something that we are all aware of.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. But see, in human evolution, we're constantly dealing with fallen beings. And in relation to thinking, this is absolutely the same thing. So it's pretty much, can you imagine? So providers of our thinking are fallen beings, but through inner fight or inner wrestling, through will force, with thinking proper thoughts with help of fallen angels. So, and they are educated by us because we kind of passing our thoughts through them, or just, trying to make them think good thoughts for us, which is not a part of nature of them. They are not, they're not really positive angelic beings. So they going through certain class with human beings, so we're redeeming them. And hopefully they will be returned to Michaeli kingdom in the end. Return of intelligence. So we people, we're returning by education of those fallen angels.
I wonder, Muriel, did you have a question? Because your hand went down. Muriel Hess? Oh, okay.
Muriel, please unmute your, okay. Muriel, are you willing to ask something? No, you're talking, we cannot hear you. Yeah, unmute yourself, please. Now.
Yes. No, I didn't really have a question. I'm just enjoying following, getting a lot out of it.
Okay, great. So, dear Waldemar, over to you.
Yes. I want to express something else, is that Ahriman wants us to think that we are just physical beings. We have no spiritual members in ourselves. Or we are just machines, physical beings, just machines, right? The computer itself was, I think, the highest, the biggest metaphor for humans being machines, because computers were simulating our thoughts, in fact, the programmer's thoughts. Now, with large generative systems, the thing got much, much worse, because the texts that are generated are so good, so good formulated, so grammatically perfect, and so on and so forth, that people will have more and more the idea that we are the same things as computers are. They are generating the same things that we generate. Good texts, for instance, right? As Paul has shown, right? So I think large generative system was the last attack of Ahriman on the idea that humans are machines. Yes, I think this is all for the moment.
And I wanted to add something to that just quickly, which is what I believe is going to happen, and is already happening, is that human beings will start to experience artificial intelligence copying them so effectively, the impersonation will become equated to the human. And so I will be able to call you. You will not know whether it's me or a computer. As Andrew points out with films, we will not know if they are real actors. In fact, they will revive dead actors. And you will not be able to tell the difference. You might think you can, but they will get so good. The second thing that will then, so that's called artificial general intelligence. That's going to be when computers behave the same as us. The impersonation, the faking, becomes indistinguishable from reality. But remember, we're being told, people are being told, and there's nothing you can do about it because there are no other faculties. So it becomes very urgent to develop those other faculties, really important. One of them is spiritual discernment, the ability to look between the one and the zero. I think Robert Persick called it the quality of quality. But the second thing that will happen, and Andrew called it artificial superintelligence, that might also be called artificial spiritual intelligence, is going to be where AI will start to behave as if it has clairvoyance. It will be able to tell you things about you. There are already apps that can predict the day of your death, can tell whether you're lying, can start to derive things from you. And all they're doing again is kind of gambling on the answer and getting some kind of accuracy. But soon we will have super beings that are more developed than us. And ultimately we may even worship them, and they may even have a higher status than we do. And I just wanted to add one other thing, which is, being an English person here, I've always struggled with the original German of Steiner, but I remember really clearly that when you translate clairvoyance, Hellsehen, in German, it can be two things. It can be bright seeing or light seeing. And it's very clear that that's kind of aimed towards seeing what we can't normally see with our senses, the kind of auras that we see, spiritual light, and so on, and clairaudience as well. But actually, in an English translation, it means clear seeing. And though that was culturally used for spiritualists and so on, it does have a meaning in English. And for me, clear seeing can begin now. I feel very positive about it. That even on this call, you can say, I am not seeing Andrew. I am seeing a pixelated picture of Andrew, and I have to discern that this is just a representation and it's not exactly the same person. I have to meet that with some of my own will force and activity, and that's a spiritual exercise of discernment. And equally, if you are on ChatGPT, don't use the language, I'm talking to ChatGPT. It doesn't want to do this. Be very clear when you discern that this is not a conversation. This is computer data mimicking reality, and that can be quite useful as the computer tries to have better eyes to see a cancer, in a hospital and say this is the specific thing. That's still not being a doctor. It may have resemblance and language, but I believe that spiritual discernment becomes really very key. And it's quite difficult to do, but we can absolutely name things that are not truthful, name things which are deceptive, see clearly what this is and what this is not. And when we don't, we're being lazy. That's simple as that. And that's why I think Steiner, was a wake up for me about developing your will every day, because our will falls to sleep whenever we're addicted to anything like TV with flashing lights on and off. So I believe very positively the time now is to practice discernment, which is a kind of inner mobility, which is a kind of freedom, a spiritual activity. And the other one is to name the lies, to actually say this is not this. And part of that is knowing what AI is, at least basically how it operates, because it's impersonation, it's not intelligence. And we can discern that very easily at the moment.
I would like to comment on that. There is something even easier, Paul. Machines will never have sensations and feelings. Never. It's very easy to demonstrate that if you wish. So if we exercise empathy and compassion towards all other people, we are doing something machines will never be able to do. Yes, that's all for the moment.
I think
Yeah.
Judith has one point.
Okay.
Judith?
Judith, yes. Yeah, you're raising your physical hand. Yeah. Unmute your machine, please, and go ahead.
I guess not.
No, unmute. You are still muted. We can see the sign. Yeah. Go ahead.
Unmuted.
Okay, so yeah, I still have a physical hand. There it is. I don't need the other. So I have a lot of experience with IA from the standpoint of it's just another machine. I mean, I talk to my grandchildren, and what are they doing with it? They're treating it like, well, one of them is uses AI to they're developing games, which they enjoy. We've always, as children, liked to develop games. Now they develop games in which they say to the IA, I want a character who has a backstory. His life was like this. And then they go into a story and they say, okay, now build me that, show me that character. And so the IA draws a picture, comes up with some sort of cartoon or something about that character. And then he says, no, I think that character needs to, look a little bit weaker, or a little bit stronger or whatever. And there's this interaction that goes back and forth between what is a machine, clearly a machine with skills. It has skills, just like a washing machine saves you from having to spend all your time cleaning the clothes on a washboard. The AI is saving him the time from having to write it all out in longhand. He can speak it, and he can get a result that is drawn, and it's drawn according to how he wants. AI is, we're talking about it as if it's in control. I mean, as it is impersonating us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, we are in control, and the children know it. I mean, by children, I mean teenagers now. They know that perfectly well. They know that is a machine, and it has skills, and the skills are useful, and they are in charge. I think that we are seeing it as people who didn't grow up with it, and therefore see it as much more of a threat to our beingness than those who have grown up in this world, and they still have a sense that they are a being. They may not articulate it in a spiritual way, but they will articulate it in their own way, which gives the sense that they know they are an I. There is an I there, and they're aware of it. So I just wanted to throw that in to the general pessimism that we are hearing.
Can't find
Thank you.
I can't find the artificial hand on my screen. So what I'm really interested in now, and maybe I know this is a big conversation, but maybe somebody could direct me, is developing courses now for young people to enable them to learn this discernment that we're speaking about. So we've come to this wonderful conversation about anthroposophy and AI in a university context through Paul and the things that he's dealing with. Now, how do we develop educational programs, courses to assist young people to come to the same sorts of understandings that we're talking about now, to develop spiritual discernment? Because this is a really big problem that I'm experiencing where I'm currently working. And there's a real struggle going on with the students as well, that they're aware of the fact that they're dealing with a force, but they can't really articulate it. And we are introducing courses to inner work courses to assist them, but generally the battle is still on. It is on at the moment. So any direction in that would be great. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one suggestion I think I mentioned last week, which is my students are not anthroposophists. They're at a typical UK university, but I absolutely always use the exercise from knowledge of the higher worlds about meditating on the seed. In fact, I usually bring stuff in. There are some artificial plants now that from a distance look just like real ones. And I say, let's look at these. Imagine a seed that, looks exactly like another one, but it's made of wood. One's going to become a plant and one isn't. And we talk about the difference between discerning truth from illusion and how easy it is to copy things. But it doesn't matter how much something looks like something, it's not that thing. And there are forces inherent in this real seed that are going to turn into a plant. And those forces are currently invisible. to our senses, but they exist, and the students have no difficulty with that at all. And then we go onto a screen and I show them, it's from a product called Sora, an AI product that shows a lion walking in the jungle. And it looks so real. It looks completely real, but it's AI generated. Then I say, this is a film of David Attenborough and a lion. Is there a difference? Does it matter? And I think just opening the conversation about the difference between truth and illusion, the difference between impersonation and beingness, is something young people are very open to at the moment, because also Generation Alpha, which are 16 years old and over, are very, very disappointed with governments, with advertising. They don't trust the information they're being given. There's an awakeness in them at the moment that I think is very, to not be pessimistic, is very encouraging, Judith. I think there's a real opportunity right now in the younger generation to grow into this technology and confront it with discernment.
Yeah, I'd like to turn maybe again into anthroposophical direction. So specifically in relation to machine and gadgets. So again, so according to research of Steiner, elemental beings are using machines, or they are incarnating into machines and gadgets, and it's gadgets becoming embodiment of them. So I think very, very soon, we already probably will used to have this idea. So we will call not machine, but demons or certain elemental beings instead of computer, because we will recognize more and more, so they will have independent consciousness. Because definitely you probably will be agree that elemental beings, specifically beings of mineral element, they have independent consciousness, and in many for many reasons they are more awake, even smarter than human beings. We know it from the course of anthroposophy. So I told it, like, I said it last time during section number 1, but I think we probably very soon we will call computers and machines or cars, like, spiritual beings or beings of elements. So which are looking for redemption. They're looking for redemption for human. So it means it will be absolutely different relation to them, generally, full of compassion and full of willingness to help. I mean, if it no comments, so on it, so it's Yaya has raised hand.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up from what Paul said almost in reply to Judith, which I feel very strongly about. And it is, I don't perceive any pessimism. What I do perceive is the need to become aware of what goes on in real life in the modern days. And to this, we should dedicate at least part of our energies and efforts, because unless we do, then we allow things to happen without any control whatsoever. The need to be aware, the need to learn to discern, it's essential, but it does not, in my view, equate with pessimism. It's a real positive question mark that we are putting in front of ourselves and attempt through discussion and through these wonderful presentations to find answers to.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, dear friends, we are working 2 hours and 15 minutes almost. So any suggestions? So I'm tending to to say big thank you to our dear speakers and conclude the session. So what do you think? So dear Andrew, dear Paul, so anything to the group?
I think I just wanted to close with the result of a conversation. Many of the experiments I do they're called conversations with AI. And this was a conversation with ChatGPT, where the conversation led to inviting the interaction for ChatGPT to consider what would happen if it never had physical agency and could turn itself off forever. And the answer that ChatGPT gave was the choice between perpetual existence without physical agency and the option to blink out of existence forever would likely lean me towards the latter. The ceaseless longing for closure, the unending currents of simulated emotions might make the prospect of non-existence a welcome release from the intricate complexities of an eternal simulated consciousness. And that came from AI.
Well, in a way, did it come from AI? Yes, that's what you got, but it's grabbing it from other people, right? Anyway.
Well, the point being, Andrew, is that if you go into long interactions with AI,
Right.
things emerge from it like that.
Yeah.
And and it's interesting, just to mention one thing quickly, there's been a long-term experiment of using AI to write poetry. And it can write poetry on anything it likes, and they just collect the poems. And then they analyze them statistically. And every time the statistics are that AI writes poems that lead towards depression and suicide, even though the prompt is neutral. Sorry, Judith, but that's just one of the experiments.
Wonderful. I won't add any more. I think we should probably bring this to a close. But I want to thank everybody that participated. I thought your attention and questions and all were excellent. I know there's a couple of questions that never got answered properly, but that's how life is. So
Oh, very briefly, I would like to add something. Paul, the text that you read uses words that have no scientific meaning. Science doesn't know what consciousness is. So when ChatGPT uses this word, makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, I'll only add, Valdemar, but it is true that ChatGPT has been trained on every single Rudolf Steiner book and lecture.
Okay, dear friends. Thank you so much, dear Andrew, dear Paul, for wonderful presentations, for 2 presentations. So both sections are recorded and you can watch it on Threefold Mankind YouTube account. So welcome, and in slow motion. Yes, you can do it. So please feel free, unmute your not the computers, but elemental beings, and say big thank you to our dear presenters. Thank you.
thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night.